The distress call had been broadcasting for 9 hours when the human ship arrived. 17 species filled the great chamber of Verath Station. Reinforcements had been pouring in all morning. Tharan battle cruisers, Velhari swarm carriers, Lakari hammer-class destroyers. Each fleet that arrived was met with cheers, with horns, with the booming pride of beings who knew their banners had been seen. Then the human ship came through the jump gate. One ship. The chamber went quiet, then it laughed. Admiral Sova stood on the high command balcony with 2 of her 4 arms folded behind her back. She watched the small vessel drift into formation and felt something hot and ugly turn in her chest. She had spent 6 weeks personally drafting the plea to Earth. She had argued for it in 3 council sessions. She had stood in front of every species in this room and promised that humans would change the war. And Earth had sent her a ship the size of a courier shuttle. "Admiral," her aide said quietly, "the human captain is requesting permission to dock." "Permission granted," Sova said. She did not turn around. "Tell her we will discuss the terms of her early departure." The aide hesitated. "Ma'am, she is also requesting access to the war archive." "All of it?" "All of it, 11 years. Sova finally turned. "Tell her she has 4 hours. After that, I will personally walk her back to her ship and apologize to my fleet for wasting their time." The aide bowed and left. The human captain arrived without an honor guard. She walked through the chamber alone, in a plain gray uniform with her hands at her sides. She was small even by human standards. She did not look around at the towering aliens watching her. She did not nod or smile. She walked to the war archive, sat down at a reading station and began. Her name was Dara Akafer. She was 38 years old. She drank water from a metal flask and did not speak to anyone for 3 hours and 50 minutes. At the 4-hour mark, she stood up and walked to Sova's office. Sova was already standing. She had her speech ready. She had been polishing it for hours, sharpening every word until it could cut bone. She intended to send this human home with the understanding that the coalition did not have time for symbolic gestures. Dara Akafer walked in, closed the door behind her, and sat down without being invited. "I have 2 questions," she said. Sova blinked all 4 of her eyes. "Captain, before you ask anything, I want to make clear that the coalition expected. What is the Dravak protecting?" The room went still. Sova opened her mouth, closed it. The speech she had prepared crumbled in her head like dry paper. What? "The Dravak Dominion, 11 years of war. They have advanced, retreated, advanced again. They have fortified 6 sectors. They have abandoned 3. Every battle map I just reviewed shows the same pattern. They are not trying to win. They are trying to keep you away from something. What is it?" Sova stared at her. "We do not know." "Have you tried to find out?" "Captain, the Dravak are a machine empire. They do not have a single point of failure. We have studied." "My second question," Dara said, "why haven't you destroyed it yet?" Sova had no answer to that either. The silence stretched. Outside, through the wide window, the small human ship hung in space beside fleets 100 times its size. Sova looked at it and felt, for the first time in 11 years of war, that she had been missing something so basic that her bones hurt. "What is the name of your ship?" she asked finally. "The Iron Oath." "And what does Earth expect one ship to do?" Dara considered this. "Look first, decide later." "Decide what?" "How much more we send." Sova sat down slowly. Tharan rarely sat in front of strangers. It was a sign of exhaustion, of giving up posture. She sat anyway. "Captain Akafer, my fleet has lost 40,000 soldiers this year. My homeworld has lost an entire generation. We have called every ally we have. We are losing this war, and you are telling me that Earth sent you here to look." "Yes. And if you decide we are not worth helping, then I will go home, and Earth will make peace with the Dravak on its own terms." Sova went very still. Earth could do that. Dara did not answer. After a long moment, Sova spoke again. What do you need? Time, permission, and no escort. I want my ship at the rear of the formation, far from your lines, with no coalition vessel within 50,000 kilometers. That will leave you exposed. It will leave me unobserved. There is a difference. Sova studied her. There was nothing soft in this woman. There was nothing hard either. She was simply present, the way a stone was present, the way gravity was present. Sova had commanded fleets for 30 years, and she could not read this human at all. Permission granted, she said. Dara stood. Thank you, Admiral. Captain, before you go. Dara paused at the door. What do humans do, Sova asked, when they do not know if they can win? Dara thought about this for a moment. We sleep, she said, and then we look harder. She left. Sova sat alone in her office for a long time. Outside, the Iron Oath drifted to the rear of the fleet and went dark. No signals, no engines, nothing. It was, by every measurement Sova trusted, the smallest warship in the formation. She had a feeling, deep in her chest, that she had just made the most important decision of her life. She did not yet know if it was the right one. No one had told Lieutenant Fendakar that humans slept before battles. He had been told many things about humans during his briefing. He had been told they were emotional. He had been told they could survive impacts that would shatter a Velhari shell. He had been told they laughed when frightened, which his instructors said was a sign of psychological instability. No one had mentioned the sleeping. Fen stood in the corridor of the Iron Oath at 2:47 ship time and watched, through a soft blue light, as the night shift moved past him in slow, quiet steps. Half of the crew was in their bunks, actually unconscious, with a battle scheduled in 2 days. He had asked the human at the navigation post, very politely, if perhaps the captain had not yet briefed the crew on the urgency of their situation. The human, a tall woman with short gray hair, had looked at him for a long moment and then said, "Son, if I do not sleep, I will not be useful tomorrow. The galaxy can wait 6 hours." Fen had stood in that corridor for 15 minutes after she walked away, trying to understand what had just happened. He was here as a witness. Admiral Sova had been clear. Watch the humans, report everything, tell us what they actually do when no one is looking. So far, what they actually did was sleep, argue about food, run drills that broke their own systems on purpose, and laugh at things Fen could not parse. The food argument had been particularly confusing. 2 crew members had spent 20 minutes shouting at each other in the galley about whether a certain spice was acceptable in a stew. Fen had been certain a fight would break out. Instead, they had finished cooking together, eaten the stew, and one of them had clapped the other on the shoulder and called him a brother. Fen had filed 3 reports in his first day. By the second day, he had stopped filing reports. There was too much. None of it fit any pattern he had been trained to recognize. On the third day, Captain Akafer walked into the small observation room where Fen had been assigned a station, sat down across from him and said, "Tonight we go dark. I want you to stay in this room. Do not speak to the crew. Do not access any systems. Just watch." "Where are we going?" "Inside the Dravek patrol routes, Sector 9. We will be there for approximately 8 hours. Fen felt his outer shell tighten. Velhari did that when frightened. "Captain, with respect, the Coalition has tried to penetrate Sector 9 for 4 years. Every probe we have sent has been destroyed. Their sensor net looks for power signatures and propulsion wakes. We will produce neither. You cannot move a warship without engines. You cannot move it under thrust. You can move it on momentum in the dark very slowly. We have done this before." "Where?" She gave him a small flat look. "Earth." She left. At 300, every light on the Iron Oath went out. Fenn had thought he understood what dark meant. He had served in space for 16 years. He had been in damaged ships, in power loss drills, in stealth runs. He knew dark. This was different. The iron oath did not just dim. It stopped. The hum of the engines, the soft pulse of the air systems, the low, constant note of the reactor, all of it just ended. The ship became a piece of debris, a cold metal shape drifting on the path it had already chosen. Fenn sat very still in the dark. He could hear his own breathing. He could hear the crew, somewhere down the corridor, whispering to each other in a language he did not speak. Hours passed. Then more hours. At one point, a Dravac patrol cruiser passed within 4,000 kilometers. Fenn knew because he could see it through the viewport, a long black shape with green running lights, sliding past like a predator that did not know there was prey beside it. He held his breath. He held it for so long that his vision started to spot. The cruiser passed. The iron oath drifted on. What Fenn did not understand, what he could not understand for a long time afterward, was what the humans were doing during those 8 hours. They were not panicking. They were not preparing weapons. They were collecting signals. Every passive sensor on the ship was open. Every receiver was listening. They were eating the entire conversation of the Dravac fleet, raw, in real time, and they were not transmitting anything back. When the iron oath drifted out of Sector 9 and the lights came back on, Captain HFY was already in the briefing room with 3 of her officers. They had a star map projected above the table. She looked up when Fenn walked in. She did not smile. She did not ask if he was all right. She said, "There is a station at the center of the Dravac formation. It is not on any of your maps. It coordinates everything. Their patrol patterns, their fleet movements, their target priorities. Every order in the entire war passes through it." She tapped the map. "This is what they have been protecting for 11 years. Fenn stared at the point her finger touched. "Why has no one seen it before?" he asked very quietly. "Because no one ever stopped fighting long enough to look for it." She turned away from the map. She looked at Fenn for a long time. "We saw it," she said, "because we did nothing for 8 hours." Fenn sat down. He had to. His legs had stopped working. She let him sit. "I need you to send a message to Admiral Sova," she said gently. "Tell her I need the War Council, tomorrow." "What do I tell her you have?" "Tell her I have a plan." Fenn swallowed. "Will it work?" Captain HFY finally smiled. It was a very small smile, and there was no warmth in it at all. "It will," she said, "if no one hesitates." There were 43 admirals in the War Council, and 42 of them were already shouting before Captain HFY had finished her first slide. The 43rd was Admiral Sova, and she was not shouting because she had stopped breathing. The slide on the wall was a deep 3-dimensional map of the Dravac formation. At its center, glowing in soft red, was a station the size of a small moon. The label beside it read, "Primary Coordination Relay. Range, 6.2 light-years. Confidence, 96%. A Lakari general slammed one of his thick paws on the table. "Impossible. We have mapped every Dravac structure in this region. There is nothing there." "There is nothing on your maps," Dara HFY said calmly. "There is something there." "How did you find it?" "By being quiet for 8 hours." The Lakari did not know what to do with that answer. He sat down. A Tharan fleet captain rose next. He was older than Sova, with a long jaw and 4 scarred arms. "Captain HFY, even if this station exists, even if your data is correct, the center of the Dravac formation is protected by 3 command fleets and a debris minefield that we have classified as impassable. To send a single ship through it is not strategy. It is a funeral." "It is not impassable," Dara said. "You have run this through 3,000 times." "On what computer?" "On mine." The captain blinked. "You ran 3,000 simulations on a single ship's computer." We started 2 weeks ago. We finished yesterday. Captain HFY, I am sure you are very confident in your math, but 3,000 human simulations cannot account for. They account for 94% of outcomes. The room hesitated. What about the 6%? Someone asked. They all share one cause. Which is? Dara looked around the room. She did not raise her voice. She did not have to. Hesitation, she said. Yours. The shouting started again. It went on for 2 hours. The Lakari called the plan primitive. The Velhari called it reckless. A Fesari delegate said human ships were not built for stealth, and human captains were not trained for diplomacy, and human reasoning could not be trusted in matters of galactic strategy. Through all of it, Sova said nothing. She watched Captain HFY stand at the head of the table, hands folded behind her back, and answer every question that was actually a question and ignore every question that was actually an insult. She did not get angry. She did not get defensive. She seemed, more than anything, patient. The way a doctor was patient with a sick child who did not want medicine. When the council finally fell silent, exhausted, Sova stood. I will speak now. The room went still. I have been at war for 11 years, she said. I have buried more soldiers than any of you. I have written letters to more parents than any of you. I have watched my homeworld go dark, 4 cities at a time. She let that sit for a moment. This human walked into our archive and asked 2 questions in 4 hours that none of us asked in a decade. She found something we did not know existed. She brought a plan that says we can end this war in 1 engagement. She looked around the table slowly, at every admiral and every general. You are calling her primitive. You are calling her reckless. I am asking myself a different question. Why does it take a stranger from a planet none of us have visited to see the obvious thing we have all been missing? Silence. I am approving the plan, Sova said. The coalition fleet will execute the western flank assault. Captain HFY and the Iron Oath will execute the relay strike. Anyone who wishes to vote against this plan may do so. Your vote will be recorded. Your vote will be public. After the war ends, your vote will be remembered. No one voted against. The council emptied slowly. Officers left without speaking, in small, uneasy groups. When the room was almost empty, Sova walked over to where Dara was gathering her notes. Captain, Admiral, you let me speak. Dara looked up. I noticed. Why? They needed to hear it from one of their own. If a human had said those words, half this room would have walked out. Sova considered her. You planned that. I planned for it to be possible. And if I had not said it, then I would have flown home tomorrow. Sova exhaled slowly. Captain HFY, may I ask you something off the record? Yes. How many ships does Earth actually have? Dara did not answer. How many warships, Captain? Admiral, with respect, that is a question I cannot answer. Cannot or will not. Dara closed her notebook. She looked at Sova for a long moment. There is a reason, she said quietly, that Earth sent 1 ship to look first. There is also a reason no one has ever seen our full fleet. We do not show what we have until we know what we are showing it to. The Dravak have not earned that knowledge. Neither yet has the coalition. Sova felt something cold move through her. It was not fear. It was respect, sharpened into something close to fear. And if my fleet does not hold the western flank, she asked, if we hesitate, then we both lose. And if we do not hesitate, then in 6 days, the Dravak Dominion will not be a threat to anyone. Sova nodded. She turned to leave. At the door she stopped. Captain, Admiral, I hope your math is right. Dara almost smiled. My math is fine, she said. I am more worried about your nerve. Sova laughed once, a sharp surprised sound she had not made in years. She left to give the order. The first ship to die, was a Likari hammer-class destroyer named the Stoneheart. It crossed the Dravak picket line at exactly 600 station time, exactly on schedule, with its hull markings bright and its weapons hot. It was meant to be seen. It was meant to draw attention. It drew everything. 6 Dravak interceptors came down on it within 90 seconds. The Stoneheart fired everything it had, took out 2 of the interceptors, and broke apart in a cloud of slow-burning metal. Its crew of 214 never had time to launch escape pods. Admiral Sova watched it die from the bridge of her flagship. She did not flinch. She had been told this would happen. She had given the order anyway. "Wave 2, she said. "Forward." 46 more ships moved into the picket line behind the Stoneheart. The Dravak fleet shifted to meet them. Long black warships, smooth and segmented like insects, slid out from behind the western moons in formation so perfect it looked rehearsed. Sova's fleet hit them at full speed. The noise of it filled every channel. Plasma fire, hull collapse, crewmen screaming orders, crewmen screaming nothing at all. Sova listened to all of it. She had to. She could not turn it off. The point of this assault was that it had to look real. It had to look desperate. It had to look like the only thing the coalition had left. She made it look real by making it real. In the first hour of the western flank assault, she lost 11 ships and 2,000 soldiers. In the second hour, the Dravak began to commit reserves. That was when she knew it was working. Far on the other side of the formation, beyond 3 command fleets and a debris field nobody had ever crossed, the Iron Oath was moving in absolute silence. Lieutenant Fen Dakar stood at the back of the bridge with his hands clenched against his sides. The lights were red. Voices were whispers. There were 46 humans working at consoles around him, and all of them moved like they were underwater, slow and careful and silent. Captain Akafar sat in the center seat. She had not moved in 2 hours. She was watching the debris field on the main screen and giving directional corrections in numbers so small Fen could barely hear them. Point 3 down. Hold. Point 1 starboard, hold there. The Iron Oath drifted between 2 pieces of dead Dravak warship, each one larger than the human ship itself, moving so close that Fen could see the rivets on their hulls. There was no margin, no second chance. If the navigation officer made one wrong adjustment, the Iron Oath would not survive long enough to know it had been hit. The navigation officer did not make any wrong adjustments. Fen had watched humans do many strange things in the last 2 weeks. He had watched them sleep before battles. He had watched them argue about food and laugh during weapons drills. He had watched them eat 8 hours of Dravak signal traffic in the dark. He had not, until this moment, understood what humans actually were. They were not aggressive. They were not emotional. They were not unstable. They were patient. They were the most patient species he had ever met. They could hold their breath for hours. They could sit in the dark and wait. They could move centimeters at a time through a debris field that everyone else had said was impossible because everyone else had been moving too fast to see the path. He had been told all his life that Velhari were the careful species, the thoughtful species, the species that planned. He realized, watching Captain Akafar sit motionless in her chair while her ship threaded a needle made of corpses, that his people had no idea what careful actually meant. 500 kilometers to the inner ring, the navigation officer whispered. "Hold course," Dara said. 300. Hold. 100. Hold. The Iron Oath slipped through the inner ring of the debris field and into open space. For the first time in 3 hours, every human on the bridge took a breath. "Engines online in 60 seconds, Dara said. "Weapons stay cold, repeat. Weapons stay cold. We are not here to fight, we are here to deliver." The relay station was visible now. It filled the forward viewport. It was bigger than Fen had imagined. bigger than any of the simulations had shown. A sphere of dark metal the size of a small moon, ringed by transmitter arrays, glowing faintly with the soft yellow light of communication signals leaving its surface in every direction at once. It was the heart of the Dravak War. It had been beating for 11 years and no one had ever seen it. Fenn stared at it, his shell tightened. "Captain," he said quietly, "it is enormous." "I know. How are we going to destroy something that big with one ship?" Dara turned her head just slightly and looked at him. "We are not going to destroy it with weapons," she said. "Then with what?" "With listening." She turned back to the viewport. "For 8 hours we listened to its language. We learned how it speaks to its fleet. We learned the exact frequencies it uses. We learned the patterns. And then we built something on this ship in 8 days that speaks the same language back to it. But wrong." "Wrong how?" "Wrong enough that when it hears the message, it will try to correct itself. And when it tries to correct itself, it will tear itself apart from the inside out." Fenn stared at her. "You are going to make it kill itself," he said. "Yes." "With a signal." "Yes." The iron oath drifted closer. Engines silent, weapons cold. A small gray ship in front of a small dead moon, carrying the end of an 11-year war in a transmitter the size of a dinner table. Dara looked at it for a long moment. "Good," she said softly. She turned to her crew. "Bring the array online." There was no sound when the iron oath fired. That was the strangest part. Fenn had braced himself for noise, for shaking, for the loud certainty of a weapon doing its work. He had spent his whole career on warships. He knew what war felt like in your bones. This did not feel like war. A console hummed. A small green light came on. The transmitter array, mounted along the spine of the human ship, sent out a single packet of signal toward the relay station. The packet was 11 seconds long. It used Dravak coordination protocols. It carried a perfectly formed instruction set. The instructions did not make sense. They were correct enough that the relay would accept them as legitimate. They were wrong enough that the relay's correction systems would try to fix them. And the corrections would conflict with each other, because Dara Akhafer's engineers had designed the packet so that every correction triggered another error, and every new error triggered another correction, in a cascade that would not stop. For about 12 seconds, nothing happened. Then the lights on the relay station began to flicker. Not all at once, slowly, one ring at a time starting at the top. The soft yellow communication glow began to pulse, irregular like a heart that had forgotten its own rhythm. Then a section near the equator went dark. Then another. Then a long arc of transmitter arrays simply stopped mid-broadcast and went black. "It is working," whispered the human at the signal's console. "Quiet," Dara said. "Watch." Fenn watched. The relay station began to come apart from the inside. It was beautiful in a way Fenn would not be able to describe in any report he ever filed. The outer hull stayed intact for almost a full minute. Only the lights died. But inside, deep in the core, where the coordination systems lived, the cascade Dara had triggered was eating itself in widening circles. He could see it through small fractures opening on the surface. Bright white flares, brief and silent. Each one was a system tearing itself open trying to fix a problem that did not exist. Then the outer hull cracked. It cracked along a perfect grid pattern, every fracture line exactly the same distance from the next, because the Dravak built everything in perfect grids, and their structures failed in perfect grids too. Pieces the size of city blocks began to drift away from the central sphere. The remaining lights died. The relay station was dead. Fenn turned to look at Captain Akhafer. He expected her to smile. He expected her to say something. He had read about human victories in the briefings. He had been told humans cheered. She did not cheer. She closed her eyes for a moment. Then she opened them and said very quietly, "Send the signal to Sova." A communications officer nodded. 3 light minutes away, on the western flank, Admiral Sova was bleeding her fleet to keep the distraction alive. She had lost 28 ships. She had lost almost 5,000 soldiers. The Dravak were grinding her formation down with the patient efficiency they had always used. Then all at once the Dravak stopped. They did not retreat. They did not regroup. They simply stopped. Their formation, which had been moving as one body for the entire war, began to drift apart. Ships lost their assigned positions. Squadrons lost contact with each other. The flagship of the Dravak Third Fleet began to broadcast on an open frequency, demanding orders from a relay that no longer existed. There was no panic on the Dravak side. The Dravak did not panic. They simply went quiet, like puppets whose strings had all been cut at once. On her bridge, Sova received the signal from the Iron Oath. 3 short words. Relay is down. She stood up. Every officer on the bridge turned to look at her. All ships, she said, and her voice carried through the entire fleet network. The enemy has lost coordination. We will not, battle plan Tertius, press the advantage, take the formation apart, now. The coalition fleet moved. It moved like nothing the Dravak had ever seen. After 11 years of being the slow, careful side, the coalition fleet became fast and brutal and exact. Ships that had spent a decade on the defensive flowed forward in formations they had drilled in private for years and never been allowed to use. The Dravak, no longer coordinated, fought back in scattered pieces. They were still dangerous. They were still deadly. But they were 3 fleets pretending to be one, and the pretending was over. In 6 hours, the Dravak central formation broke. In 10 hours, what had been the most feared war machine in the sector was a scatter of damaged ships limping toward deep space. Back on the Iron Oath, Fen Dakar stood beside Captain Akafor and watched the data come in. He watched the war end. He watched 11 years of his people's grief turn into something different, something he did not yet have a word for. Captain Akafor sat in her chair. Someone had brought her a metal flask. She drank from it slowly. She did not speak for a long time. Finally, without looking at him, she said, "Lieutenant Dakar." "Captain, does your language have a word for relief?" Finn thought about it. He thought about it for a long time. "No," he said. "We have a word that means the pain of a long tension finally released. It is not the same as relief. Relief is light. The Velhari word is heavy. It is what you feel after you have been holding something for so long that the holding becomes part of you, and when you set it down, your body does not know how to stand without it." Dara was quiet for a moment. "That is better," she said. "Better than what?" "Better than relief." She closed her eyes. The Iron Oath drifted in silence beside the broken relay station. The war was over. Nobody on the human ship celebrated. Fen understood finally why. There was nothing to celebrate. There was only the weight finally set down. 6 weeks later, on a quiet observation deck overlooking a slow rotating star field, 2 beings sat across from each other and tried to understand what had happened to the galaxy. Sova had ordered the deck cleared. There were no aides, no recording drones, no protocol officers. There was a small low table, 2 cups of something warm, and a wide window. Beyond the window, the Iron Oath was being loaded for departure. Captain Dara Akafor sat with her hands wrapped around her cup. She was wearing the same plain gray uniform she had worn the day she arrived. She looked, Sova thought, exactly the same as she had on day 1. Calm, quiet, unimpressed by her own presence. The galaxy in the last 6 weeks had not been quiet at all. 12 coalition member species had requested human warships in their fleets. 3 had requested human military advisors. 2 had requested human captains for joint command. The Fesari delegation, which had publicly mocked Dara's plan in the War Council, had filed a formal apology and requested a trade agreement with Earth. Earth had answered all of these requests with the same polite three-line response. "We will consider it. Thank you for your patience. We will be in touch." There had been no warships sent, no advisors, no captains, no follow-up of any kind. Some coalition leaders called this insulting. Some called it modest. A small number, the ones Sova trusted most, called it terrifying. She had finally understood in the last 6 weeks what those leaders meant. "Captain," she said. "Admiral, why did Earth send one ship?" Dara took a slow sip from her cup. "I told you to look first." "Yes, you told me. I do not think you told me everything." Dara looked at her over the rim of the cup. "What do you want to know?" "I want to know what would have happened if you had decided that we were not worth saving." "We would have left. And the war. Earth would have stayed out of it. Forever. For as long as it stayed away from us. And if it had come for Earth." Dara set her cup down. She did not answer for a long time. "Admiral," she said finally, "there is a question you are trying to ask me. You should just ask it." Sova folded 2 of her 4 arms. The other 2 she rested on the table, palms down. It was a Tharan gesture of total honesty. "How many warships does your species have?" "I cannot tell you." "How many ships like the Iron Oath?" "I cannot tell you." "Captain, I am asking you because I am afraid." Dara was quiet for a moment. "Admiral, you should be." The room was very still. "But not in the way you are imagining," Dara continued. "We are not a threat. We have not built our fleet to take territory. We have built it to make sure no one ever takes ours. And the only reason I am telling you that much is because I trust you personally, not the coalition. You." "Why me?" "Because in the War Council you let me be heard. You did not have to. You did anyway. That tells me something about you. It tells me you can be told the truth without using it as a weapon. That is rarer than you think." Sova absorbed that. Outside the window, the Iron Oath finished loading. A small plume of vapor came off its hull as the cooling systems primed for jump. "Captain Akafar," Sova said quietly, "what does it mean that humans think the way you think?" "It means we are slow." "Slow?" "We do not act first. We watch. We listen. We model. We run things 3,000 times before we run them once. The galaxy looks at our ships and our soldiers and thinks the dangerous part of us is our weapons. The dangerous part of us is the time we are willing to take before we use them." Sova thought about that. "And if someone tries to hurry you?" Dara smiled very slightly. "Then we go faster than they expected, once." She stood up. She set her cup on the table. "Admiral, thank you for trusting one ship." Sova stood too. She extended one of her 4 hands the way humans did. Dara took it. "Captain," Sova said, "if you ever come back, come as a friend, not as a captain." "I will try." She walked to the door. At the door she paused, the way she had paused once before, weeks ago in another office. "Admiral." "Yes." "Tell Lieutenant Dakar his report was good. The part about not making fear of us into policy. He is right. He will be honored to hear it. Tell him also that we read every report you file about us." Sova went very still. Dara left. A short time later, Lieutenant Fen Dakar stood beside Sova on the observation deck and watched the Iron Oath rise away from the station. It moved slowly at first, then faster, then it was a small bright point against the dark. Then it was gone. "What did she say to you?" Fen asked. "At the end?" Sova considered. "She said many things." "Anything important?" "All of it." Fen waited. Sova did not say more. She kept watching the empty space where the human ship had been. "My report goes out tonight," Fen said quietly, "to every coalition government. The conclusion is the one we discussed." "Read it to me." Fen took a breath. Do not allow fear of humanity to become policy, but do not forget what you saw here. They did not win because they are stronger. They won because they think differently. The distance between those two facts is where we should all be paying attention. Sova nodded slowly. Send it, she said, word for word. She kept watching the stars. Somewhere out there, a small gray ship was carrying a quiet captain home, and behind it a galaxy was learning to live in the new shape of things. The war was over. The lesson had only just begun.